The classic video game Super Mario Bros. Is reborn as a theme park. It's called Super Nintendo World, and it's at Universal Studios in Japan and Hollywood. Hi there, everyone. I'm Jeff, and this is Plain English lesson number 555. In movies, if they ever have to read an American telephone number out loud, they usually read a phone number that includes 555. That's because this combination was reserved for directory assistants. No person would have a 555 number. So back before the internet, you would call 555-1212, and you'd get a phone operator who could look up a phone number for you. I bet some of you didn't even know that existed. Anyway, in movies, when they needed a phone number in the script, they would use a 555 number. So that way, they wouldn't accidentally use a real person's phone number in a movie. That could get annoying. Anyway, this is lesson number 555, and that means JR has uploaded today's full lesson to plainenglish.com/555. Coming up on today's Plain English, did you play Super Mario Bros. As a kid? If so, you might feel like a kid again if you go to Universal Studios in Japan or Hollywood. That's because Nintendo has teamed up with Universal to create Super Nintendo World, a part of Universal Studios theme parks. A video game that's almost 40 years old is now a theme park, and people love it. So on today's lesson, we'll reflect back on the video game and also talk about how Nintendo and Universal adapted it to a theme park. The expression today is team up, and we have a song of the week. Let's get going. In 1983, a Japanese company released an arcade game called Mario Brothers. It featured two plumbers, Mario, dressed in red, and Luigi, dressed in green. Together, they patrol the sewers of New York, killing strange creatures that live below ground. An arcade game is a video game on a specific machine. You've probably been to arcades, which have lots and lots of these machines, each machine with just one game on it. Now that, believe it or not, is how Mario Brothers started. But just a few years later, Nintendo released a video game console that attached to a television. They called it the Family Computer in Japan, or simply the Nintendo Entertainment System in North America. And when they released the console in North America, they had just 17 games available. One of them was a reimagined version of Mario Brothers. This was called Super Mario Brothers, and it would go on to become the best-selling Nintendo video game and one of the most widely recognized video games in all of history. It also inspired several follow-up games, including Mario Kart, a racing game with some of the same characters. In the console version of Super Mario Bros., Mario and Luigi are in the Mushroom Kingdom, where they are trying to save Princess Toadstool from the enemy Bowser. Mario and Luigi are controlled by the game players. They can kill enemies, achieve coins, jump around, and even double in size. This was an early example of a side-scrolling game. In a side-scrolling game, the players stay at the center of the screen while the background scrolls from right to left, simulating the character's movement forward in a two-dimensional world. It was also an early example of a game with multiple levels, with each level increasing in difficulty. Since then, video games have improved considerably, and Mario Brothers is no longer the cultural hit it once was. But the game is getting a new life. That's because Nintendo and Universal Studios are opening Mario Brothers theme parks around the world. The first one opened in Japan in 2021. Nintendo World at Universal Studios Hollywood opened last month, and new versions are planned for Orlando and Singapore. You enter the park through a huge green pipe, just like in the video game. Visitors say the park's design is spot on. The bright colors really make you feel like you're in the Mushroom Kingdom. The park features rides, character meet and greets, and game-inspired food. The biggest ride is Mario Kart, created after the video game by the same name. This is a theme park about a video game, and what's interesting is that the theme park visit is gamified. In other words, visitors get to act like game players, accumulating points and unlocking rewards for activities in the park. By using the smartphone app and wristband, visitors can collect coins and win points, just like players in a game. You can get points by going on rides, meeting the characters, playing mini games, and collecting coins and keys sprinkled throughout the park. Leaderboards on the app show which visitors are collecting the most points. If you come back to the park, you can keep accumulating points. The park also includes Mario-themed slot machines and other small games and challenges. Visitors on the Mario Kart ride put on special virtual reality glasses and get to play along and earn points as the ride advances. At the end of the ride, visitors can see how they did in comparison with the others on the ride at the same time. When I first heard that Nintendo and Universal Studios were teaming up to create a Mario Brothers theme park, my first reaction was, why? Yes, Mario Brothers and later Mario Kart were huge video games in their time, but their time was many years ago. Mario Kart was released in 1992. That's 30 years ago. But reading about it now, I think it makes a lot of sense. First, the design is brilliant for kids. The mushrooms, the castles, the pipes, the bright colors, the vividness of the whole world. It's made for kids. And the original game designers also designed the parks. Second, many of the game elements, collecting coins, for example, reaching a palace, things like that, these are things you can simulate with kids in a park. And that's really the innovation. When you go to the park, you get to play the game. Now, unlike other parks where you just wander around, at Nintendo World, you can use the wristband to get points, compete with others, break your own record, just like a player in the game. The attraction is called Super Nintendo World, and it's included in a ticket to Universal Studios Japan and Universal Studios Hollywood. You can play the original Super Mario Brothers, the 1985 version, in a browser. The site is supermario-game.com. I'll link to it in the transcript. You can play it on your keyboard, and the game is right there in your web browser. It takes me back. I remembered it all, and I had to stop playing for fear that I'd break the keys on my keyboard from hitting them so hard. Now, I wasn't allowed to have a Nintendo. Well, I think I may have mentioned this before, but other kids in my neighborhood had it, so I'd play at their houses. I wasn't any good, but it was addictive and it was fun, and I can still hear the music in my head too. Today, I'm going to show you how to use the English phrasal verb team up. To team up is to create a team, usually when it's a small number of parties combining to do something together. This is most common when two people who typically act as individuals combine forces to create a team, usually for one purpose or one goal. Today's topic was all about Super Mario World at Universal Studios. Universal Studios is a theme park that showcases characters and stories from movies, TV, cartoons, and books. Universal Studios is owned by Comcast, which also owns a film studio and the rights to television properties. So a lot of the attractions you see at the theme park, these are based on movies that Universal, the film studio, has produced. And this is a way for a film studio to make more money off the movies that it produces. But today, you heard that there's a Super Nintendo World at Universal Studios. But Nintendo is an independent private company. It's not affiliated with Universal Studios. And the characters, colors, and stories from Super Mario Brothers are the intellectual property of Nintendo. Nintendo, of course, does not have a theme park. Universal doesn't have the rights to Nintendo characters. So what did Nintendo and Universal do? They teamed up to create Super Nintendo World at Universal Studios. They teamed up. Here are two companies that formed a team for just one purpose: to create Super Nintendo World at Universal theme parks. They were two independent companies doing their own thing. Then they got together and formed a team for the purpose of creating these parks. Now, the two companies didn't merge. They're still individual companies. They still have their own businesses. But for this one objective, they are working together. They teamed up. Universal is not the only one teaming up with Nintendo. Netflix is doing it too. Netflix and Nintendo are teaming up to create a special Pokemon series. This was just announced, so we don't know too much about it. But Nintendo and Netflix are teaming up to create a Netflix series about Pokemon, which Nintendo owns. ChatGPT is popular these days. With ChatGPT, you can type a question and it produces a realistic sounding answer, even if it's completely inaccurate. Microsoft invested in OpenAI, the parent company of ChatGPT. And now Microsoft is teaming up with OpenAI to enhance Microsoft's Bing search engine. ChatGPT still exists outside of Bing, but now you can get your Bing search results in the form of a ChatGPT response too. That's because Microsoft and OpenAI have teamed up to enhance Bing in this way. Have you ever wanted to join a video conference while in your car? I have never wanted that, but I did occasionally have to join a Zoom call from my car. Well, now Cisco, which makes video conferencing software, Cisco is teaming up with Mercedes-Benz to offer video conferencing services from inside the car. Prediction: the awkwardness of video calls will only increase if some of the participants are driving during the call. All of the examples I've given you are from the world of business, and most examples that come to mind are business-related examples. But it doesn't have to be. A handful of neighbors can team up to make improvements to a local park or playground. You might live in a small town with a few churches. A few churches might team up to collect donations of food and warm clothes around the winter holidays. A hospital might team up with a local sports star to promote healthy lifestyles in the community. All of these are good examples of team up. Today's song of the week is Evangeline by Steven Sanchez. In the first 10 or so seconds of the song, he samples a different song from the 1960s, and then the rest of the song is in a similar style to a 1950s or 1960s song, but updated for today. I really like this one, which I had not heard before JR picked it. Evangeline by Steven Sanchez. And that's all for today. I'm not a big theme park fan. The idea of waiting in the lines, paying the prices, it's just not for me. But I have to tell you, I'm curious about this Super Nintendo world. I was not a huge Nintendo fan, but I did like Super Mario Brothers as a kid, and I think the theme park is a great concept. If any of you have been there, I'd love to hear about it. Tag us on Instagram or in Facebook. Our handle on both platforms is @PlainEnglishPod. Plain English Pod on both Instagram and Facebook. That's all for today. As always, we'll be back on Monday with a new lesson. See you then.